Hi, I'm Jeanette White for Piper's Quilts and Comforts in Salt Lake City, Utah. Today we are doing a series of videos that might help you with any little problems you have with your knitting. And we're going to be doing a 3-needle bind-off. This is one of my all-time favorite things in knitting. And it is done on these cute little Pixie hats, which we have available in kits through our store. This is a great thing to do anytime that you have a problematic seam to make in your knitting. A good example would be a shoulder seam on a sweater or a vest that you are doing. Normally that's kind of a challenging seam to do, but if you do a 3-needle bind-off, it is super fast and it looks beautiful when it's done. It binds the stitches off and creates the seam all in one fell swoop. And you can see here, I've done a 3-needle bind-off on this little hat at the back, and it just looks really beautiful. Normally you would be using double-pointed needles to do this, but if you have more than about 15 or 20 stitches, and of course depending on the weight of yarn that you're using, then that may not be enough for you. So in this case, that is what is going on. So I've used 2 sets of needles, and I have put half the stitches on one set of needles and half the stitches on another set of needles. Now in the case of this little hat, it's an uneven number, and I'm bringing an uneven number of stitches together, so when I get to the end, I am going to have 1 stitch left over. That's not any problem at all. You're just going to cut your yarn and leave about a 10-inch tail so that you have enough to weave in and pull it through that one odd stitch that's left at the end. So I have these two halves now separated on 2 different needles, and I'm going to put right sides of my knitting together. Now, one of the tricks with doing this is keeping your tips of your needles right even together. So you can see I've got these even together. And I'm going to do this first in continental style, and then I'm going to do it in European style. So regardless of which style you knit, this will be helpful for you. I'm going to knit a stitch from my first needle, just the way you normally would. I'm not going to complete the stitch, but I'm going to stab the stitch as if I was going to knit. And then do the same thing on the back needle. Then I'm going to knit these 2 stitches, whoops, let me get underneath here, together. And transfer that stitch, just the way you normally would in a knit, to your right hand needle. Whoops, I got a split yarn there. Now I'm going to do exactly the same thing again. I'm going to knit 1 from the front needle, 1 from the back needle. I'm going to knit those 2 stitches together, pop them off the left hand needles, and with either one of these tips that are in my left hand, and it doesn't matter which one, I'm going to pick up my first stitch and pull it over my second one, just the way you would in a normal bind-off. Now, one of the big tricks with this and with a normal bind-off is keeping it nice and loose. And you can see my points are out of alignment here. I'm just going to push this one down so that they're lined up together. If they get too far out of whack, it's really easy to start dropping stitches off one of your left-hand needles, and that's not a fun thing to do. So I'm going to pull my first stitch over my second stitch. I'm going to knit 1 stitch from my first needle, 1 stitch from my second needle, knit those 2 together, pop them off my left-hand needles, and I'm going to, whoops, let me grab this, pull the first stitch over the second stitch the way you would in a normal bind-off. Okay, let's do this European style now. So of course I'll change my yarn to my right hand, and I will knit a stitch from my first needle and my second needle, and I will knit those together. Pop them off your left-hand needles. With one of your needles in your left hand, it doesn't matter which one, pull the first stitch over the second stitch. Let's do it again. I'm going to knit a stitch from the first needle and the second needle, or the front one and the back one, however you want to look at it. Knit them together, pop them off your left-hand needles. With one of your needles, it doesn't matter which one, pull the first stitch over the second stitch. I'm going to show you just so far what we've done here, but you can see that is a really invisible, professional-looking, beautiful seam. And you can see it done in the entire length on the back of this hat. This is a really fun thing to do, and it makes doing seams that normally could give you kind of a lot of problems really easy and beautiful to do. That's not so hard.